very careful whenever someone gives you a hand sign to give you priority, because in almost all cases, they haven't checked the surroundings. For example, here I'm waiting to turn right, and this pedestrian arrives at the intersection. When the light turns green, he gives me a hand sign to go. The problem is, it's an arrow pointing up, which means I can only go straight, I cannot turn. So I wait and he makes me a sign again. So he clearly didn't notice the arrow, which is something pedestrians don't tend to notice anyway because it doesn't concern them. Now this one is touchy, because a lot of times, even if there's nobody making signs, students start turning at an arrow like this. And that's because after the light turns from red to green, they just see the color green from the corner of their eye. They're not looking at the light directly, so they don't notice that it's an arrow. That happens very often. If, on top of that, you have a pedestrian urging you to go, the risk of making the mistake could be quite high. Same thing here. This construction worker is giving me a sign to go, and these people have the power to direct traffic in construction zones, even to direct you to go when the light is red. The thing is, he didn't notice his colleague crossing the street here, and his colleague doesn't notice that he's making me a sign to pass because he's not looking in his direction. So he keeps waving me, but he still doesn't see his colleague. He only sees him when he has almost crossed the whole street. And now you can see him pointing at the light, probably telling him, "Hey, the light was green for me, I didn't know." You know, these things happen. Here, notice that I have a stop, but the vehicles coming from the perpendicular axis don't. She's making me a sign to pass, but there's a car coming from my left. She probably didn't see it. Now she looks left, but she still doesn't give me a sign to wait. Then after the car passes, she gives me a sign again. The most important thing to keep in mind here is that when people give you a hand sign, they almost never check the surroundings for you. Basically, what they're saying is, I know I have priority over you, but as far as I'm concerned, you can go. But not necessarily as far as the others are concerned too. And often the way that students and even sometimes experienced drivers will react is, since they're so nice as to give me priority, I should get out of their way as quickly as possible, and they react impulsively. So what you could do in a situation like this, if they're still looking at you, is to point at the reason why you cannot go. The light here, his colleague here, and the car there. Here's another very common mistake with students. A vehicle stops in front of them at a stop sign, and it stops past the stop line, so that the front of the student's car is almost at the stop line, but not quite there. Then when the vehicle goes, the student goes too. Now here's the thing. When you stop at a stop sign, you should stop at the stop line, obviously. From inside the vehicle, it's just a bit after you don't see the stop line anymore. That means that if you still see the stop line, you're too far behind it, so you'll still have to advance a bit, even if it's just a foot, and come to a complete stop before proceeding. Now, if the vehicle in front stops at a point where the front of your vehicle is already at the stop line, you've stopped completely and you see well to both sides. As soon as they go, you can go too. What the law says is that you have to stop at the line, and in this case, you already did. It's the vehicle in front that stopped too far past the line. So if you still see the line, stop again, completely, at the line before proceeding. Now you often see people slowly advancing at red lights when waiting for them to turn green, to the point where they pass the stop line. We call that creeping. I'm pretty sure most students know better not to do that at the exam, because it's something that could result in a failure. But one question I get asked often is, if the vehicle in front advances, can I advance too? Well, as long as you don't pass the stop line, yes you can. However, in some situations, like here for example, it might also be a good idea to leave that room behind the vehicle in front. Because in intersections like these, the reason why the stop line is a bit behind is usually because there are big vehicles like buses or trucks that turn here often. So if one of those arrives when the vehicles are way past the stop line, the vehicle in front might have to reverse. Here's another mistake related to lines on the asphalt. When someone is parallel parking on a street separated by a solid line, you can't cross the solid line to overtake them. You need to wait until you have enough room to proceed without stepping on the line. The thing is, people will almost always cross the line in a situation like this, so you might be tempted to follow. Be careful with this one. I've never seen anyone, besides driving schools, wait behind in a situation like this. Also make sure to leave enough room behind the vehicle to let them park properly. Always make sure that you see the color of a traffic light before entering an intersection. Lots of vehicles don't, and they sometimes run yellow or even red lights because of that. So if there's someone in front that does that, don't just follow them blindly. Wait until you see the light. Sometimes they might be hidden by large vehicles on both sides, or they could be hidden on only one side, like here. But in this case, the light on the right side is the only one that indicates if we can turn or not. So we need to see it if we want to turn. Be especially careful with lights for lanes reserved for turning, because a lot of times they're lower, so they're often hidden by larger vehicles. Some intersections also have another light on the same side that is higher that indicates if you can turn. So look for that too. In this case, if I see here that I have an arrow allowing me to turn right, I know that the light under it will also have one. It wouldn't make sense that one would have one and the other wouldn't. And sometimes large vehicles can also hide stops. So if you're arriving at an intersection and you see one, look for a stop sign panel from behind on the other side or a stop line on the asphalt. And in this case, since the truck is stopped right at the intersection, check far to the left too before crossing into the opposite lane in case there's a vehicle turning from there towards your direction. And you'll still need to come to a complete stop at the intersection even though you're occupying the whole opposite lane. Anytime you see a big vehicle close to an intersection, be very careful, anyone could pop out behind it. And they have no choice but to advance this far because otherwise they won't see anything. So it's a good idea to keep your foot over the brake in those situations. Same thing when turning left, always make sure that you see beyond any vehicle that could be blocking your view before proceeding. The next video of this series will be about pedestrians, cyclists, and distances. So stay tuned and see you soon.